All right, so we're going to look at campaigns and voting behaviors today. Okay, so there's a bunch of stuff that goes into deciding whether you're going to vote at all. All right, one of the things is legitimacy, right? The idea that people's beliefs that the government has the right to rule, so you go out there and you vote. There's political efficacy, all right, and this is the belief that your political participation really matters, so voting is essential to you. And then there's the civic duty, the belief that in order to support a democratic government, a citizen should always vote. All right, so let's look at who actually votes. Usually it's the older population, so 40s and older. Income is usually middle to high. Education can kind of vary, but tends to be college. Marriage, usually married couples vote. Typically Caucasian. Females come out in very large numbers. Union members vote. Government workers definitely get out there and vote. And Northerners also big voters. Okay, so let's look at some registration requirements. Turnout is really impacted by voter ID requirements. Okay, so think about, right, you're working hard to get your license or you already have it. I have my license, but as you get older, a lot of times you don't need a license anymore because you don't drive. You rely on other people getting you places. So maybe you don't have that ID, but you are still wanting to vote. Maybe you're somebody who just never got a driver's license because you don't want to drive, you don't need to drive, you have no interest in driving. So voter ID requirements can sometimes be a deterrent in voting. There's also mail-in ballots, clearly a controversy in the election of 2020. But mail-in ballots, right? The state of Colorado, we have voter ID requirements. We have mail-in ballots here. Okay, we also have same-day registration here. So you could walk into a polling place, register to vote, and go cast your vote. Early voting is also really big. A lot of people open up about 3 weeks prior to the actual election date. Ballot length is definitely something that can impact voter turnout. If it's really long, really lengthy, it can sometimes be too much. And then state ballot issues. Sometimes that really brings people out. They want to vote for that thing in the state that they really want. And so then while they're at it, they vote for some other things. All right, let's look at voter behavior. Okay, you need to know these models. There's the rational choice, which is just you voting your best interests, right? A lot of these don't necessarily flow with party. They just vote for who they think is best going to do the job. There's the retrospective voting. All right, this is the idea of voting based on the recent past. How has somebody done in the job, or what is something that's impacted you recently and you're going to have that impact your vote? Then there's the prospective voting, right? Voting based on predictions about the future. If I vote for this person or I vote for this thing, it's going to help me down the road, right? And then there's just party line voting, right? This is voting for all the candidates for one party. It doesn't matter what you think of that person, right? So maybe you don't like the presidential candidate, but you are a registered whatever, you just vote for that person regardless because you're of that party and that's just who you vote for. So let's look at the purpose of elections. So the purpose of elections really is that we have regular free elections, which guarantees political action and enables citizens to kind of influence the actions of government, right? Popular election confers on a government that legitimacy that it can achieve no other way, right? So we're saying to you, government, you are legitimate. I am here to vote for whatever. All right, and also regular elections ensure that government is accountable, okay? If you don't like your congressperson, you don't vote for them. You try to fire them. You rally behind the other candidate. Same with the president or whatever. You have that power. All right, so there's also the citizens eligible to vote, all right, called the electorate. So you definitely need to know that. And then there's the mandate, right? So this is kind of a command indicated by the electorates for the elected official to carry out their platforms. The idea is I'm voting for you to carry out my platform. So that is why I'm voting for you. So you better do it. Sometimes this claim of a mandate is suspect because voters are not so much endorsing one candidate as rejecting the other one. They're just saying, well, I hate this aspect of anything, so therefore I'm going to vote for this person because I don't like that that other person stands for this thing. So that's a lot of times the mandate that follows there. There's also this thing called the initiative. This is an election that allows citizens to propose legislation and submit it to state electorates for the popular vote, so it gets it on the ballot. There's also referendums. All right, this is an election that the state legislature submits a proposed legislation to the state's voters for approval, right? Maybe they're not having luck getting it passed through the actual state legislative process, so let's just give it to the people and see what they want. And then there's the recall. This is the idea that I hate who won, so therefore I want them out of office. These are very rare, and they don't often succeed. We have recently had 2 succeed in Colorado for state legislatures, and then we have a frequent attempt to recall our governor, and they never get enough signatures or get through the process. All right, so what makes a good candidate? If you can ever figure that out, let me know. Okay, so getting the party's nomination. Okay, this is some complicated stuff, so let's go. Iowa's pretty important. I don't know why, but they are. So first, let's look at something called a caucus, all right? And this is meetings of party members used to select delegates and nominees, okay? So a state holds a caucus. You as a registered member of a party go to your caucus, whereby you vote on who you want to proceed, all right, in the primary, okay, going towards the main election. And then at that same place, they also choose people as delegates, somebody that will carry on through the convention process and continue to vote for that nominee that they're rooting for. Okay. It's organized sort of like a pyramid, and Iowa's first. Okay, so our process of getting somebody elected and on the ticket for president starts in Iowa. Okay, but I want you to think about that because Iowa is a majority white state whose main source of resources is farming. So how well does that represent the rest of the country? And Iowa is where it all starts. And Iowa, if you win Iowa, you continue on. And if you lose Iowa, you have to start thinking about, well, am I going to keep going and try for New Hampshire? Or am I going to say, oh, I gave it my all? So I guess Iowans didn't like me. So getting the party's nomination is a process. There's something called open primaries, all right, which this allows party members and non-affiliated voters to vote. So anybody can go, right? You can be a registered D or a registered R, or you can just be an undecided, and you can go to the primary and vote, okay? So if you're unaffiliated, you can go to either the D or the R primary. A closed primary allows only party members to vote. So if you are a registered Democrat or registered Republican, you go to your primary and you vote on your ticket, period, the end, no more. Okay, for primaries, New Hampshire is first. So Iowa is a caucus system, all right, did have to make some changes here during the 2020 election due to the pandemic, but typically a caucus process. And then New Hampshire, all right, is the first primary. Again, right now we're going over to the East Coast, and they're working on deciding this. So it's kind of interesting who we've chosen to be the people who start weeding out our nominee list. So let's look at primaries versus caucuses. So over the years, we tend to be going towards primaries rather than caucuses to choose our delegates. Caucuses are the oldest, all right, and most party-oriented method of choosing delegates. Caucuses is what's been around since really our country's founding. The arguments for primaries is that they're more democratic, more representative, little bit more rigorous. An argument for a caucus is that caucus participants are more informed and more interactive. There's unfair scheduling that affects the outcomes because you really do only have one time to show up at your place to stand in a group and fight for your nominee. And then there's some front loading, okay, that gives some primary states an advantage. All right. Colorado used to be a caucus state, and we are now a primary state. So, all right, front loading. This is when a state holds its primary early to capitalize on the media attention, right? If you can hold your primary, right? Iowa's always going to move theirs date earlier and earlier so that they're first. New Hampshire's going to do the same thing to make sure that they're second. But if you can get up there within the top like 12 states to hold something, you're going to capitalize on this media, which means that the candidates are really going to focus on your state, fair or not. All right, so after the nomination, right, general election campaign, part of a political campaign is aimed at winning the general election. So this occurs after the candidate has won the party's nomination. So yay, we have a big party that says you won out of all of the people running to try to be on the ticket. You got it. Okay, so now the focus is going to gain support, right? So it's going to say, hey, all of you people who were supporting the other 10 candidates who wanted this position, you should support me because, all right. Then you need to decide on the issues that you're really going to emphasize. You got to bring in all those people who are rooting on somebody else. Okay. You usually adopt a brief theme to serve as a rallying cry, right? This is your little slogan. All right. So maybe you want a stronger America. That's what Kerry and Edwards had in 2004. Maybe, right? In your heart, you know he's right. That's good old Goldwater. The opposing slogan for that was in your gut. You know he's nuts. So, and he was special. So then we're going to have the candidates must also define his or her stance on other topics, right? So we're going to get in there and you got to actually like have an argument about stuff. All right. So McGovern and Fraser Commission in 1968 wrote new rules to increase the number of female and minority delegates. So this was pretty big. And then we're going to have this thing called superdelegates. They're awarded seats based on the office they hold, such as being a member of Congress. They're like the elite. Only the Democrats have the superdelegates still, and most people want to get rid of them. But clearly the people who hold position in Congress don't, because they like being that person. So in 1974, we're going to have the Federal Election Campaign Act. And what this is going to do is it's going to administer campaign finance laws for federal elections. All right. So it says that you can have public financing of presidential elections. Nobody chooses this anymore. Okay. What it does is it limits spending and it requires disclosure, and it also limits contributions to campaigns. Most candidates today opt out of this and instead just fund their own campaign. Also, 1974, we're going to get Buckley v. VALEO. This is going to be where the Supreme Court strikes down the provision that limited the amount on individuals could spend on his or her campaign. This is pretty much how we work now, right? The idea is that you fund your own campaign and you spend as much as you want. So let's look at political action committees, okay? These were created in 1974 to allow corporations, labor unions, and all these other groups to donate money to campaigns, all right? And what happens is that we get this bipartisan law that comes about, McCain-Feingold, that sets limits of $2,000 for individual contributions and $5,000 for PACs to contribute to a candidate. So it also banned ads 30 days before primaries and 60 days before a general election. Clearly, if you are, paying any attention, that doesn't actually exist anymore because you see ads like on election day still. So we'll go over why that is. Independent organizations. All right. So this is where the 527s, right? Independent organizations, they can run these ads. They're not sponsored by a party or a candidate, but they're pretty much out there saying, vote for this candidate because of this issue, because the other person is horrible. And so they're going to push out those ads. Then we're going to get the 501c. This is a group that allows donors to remain anonymous. They do not have to report who's donating to this, but they cannot spend more than half of their funds on political activities. So if you see an ad that says, I'm so-and-so and I approve this message, then that's an ad directly from the candidate. Every other ad that bashes anybody out there, that's a 527 or a 501c ad. So, all right, independent expenditures. So this is where for communication expressly advocates that elections, right, they must identify the candidate and which is not made in coordination with any other candidate. So independent expenditures, those ads that I said, bash one person, praise another person, but they can't coordinate with that candidate or the campaign or even the political party. So those ads are totally independently done by the PAC, right? Super PAC, 527, whatever they might be. So in 2010, we're going to get Citizens United. This is going to be where 527s and 501cs, they're going to be considered to be persons, quote unquote, under the law. All right, they're going to then say that their money is a form of free speech, so they can just give money away at will. And the 30 to 60-day limit on ads, unconstitutional, which is why we see them so often, all the time. So many ads. All right, so then we're going to get super PACs, okay? Because what we want to do is we want to find ways to get more money to the people that we want to be in office so that our agenda, right, can be the main focus of that person, that party, all right, that administration. Okay, so super PACs, this is going to engage unlimited spending. All right, independent of candidates, of course, quote unquote. They can raise funds from corporations and unions and other groups without any limit. There's no limit on super PACs, what they can do. Now, it doesn't mean that they're not family friends with the campaign manager of the candidate's campaign and that they, see each other over dinner every once in a while and, but they're not coordinating. Okay. So that's kind of the loophole there. They're not actually saying you should run this ad or, hey, we're going to run this ad. But they're clearly having dinner and talking. So maybe the topic might be on campaign stuff. You just never know. So, all right, update your notes. Get all this vocabulary in there. All right. Be sure to look at the citizen story in the chapter. Okay. And until next time.